Hello one and all, welcome to Seeing Through Glass. Welcome to Joe Macari Performance Cars. Now, I actually live just around the corner from these guys, but clearly I don't get down here enough because look at the insane cars on display. I mean, there are 4 LaFerraris in shot right now. 4, I've done 3 fingers, but no, 4 is what I should have held up because that's how many Lafs are in the shot. Anyway, this is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the ridiculous cars on display today. And of course, I'm here to focus on one car in particular. But before I do that, let me give you a tour of the insane cars on show here in the main showroom at Joe Macari. Well, we might as well kick things off then here inside the Laferrari Aperta, because yes, eagle-eyed viewers will have noticed that one of the 4 LaFerraris I just mentioned is an Aperta, essentially a convertible LaFerrari. These cars are a lot more valuable, a lot more desirable than the coupes, and it makes sense, right? Who wouldn't want a convertible LaFerrari? Imagine doing 200 miles an hour, sun above you, wind through your hair, or in my case, my scalp, because I don't have hair. And what's hilarious is to my right, a LaFerrari coupe, and to my left, a LaFerrari coupe. It's as if I was Charles Leclerc. To my right, Sebastian Vettel about to drive off into his new future. To my left, incoming Carlos Sainz about to join the Ferrari family. Am I getting a bit carried away? I think I am. Time to get out. I feel like you see a ton of F40s, F50s, but not many GTOs, so always cool to see. I mean, what a ridiculous lineup. Laf, Enzo, 288. I'm not even joking when I say this is one of my favourite cars here, an original Abarth 595 SS. As you see, I don't really fit, but thankfully it's got a roof that opens so I can just stick my head out and cruise along. I would love one of these things, but they don't come cheap. It's circa 50 grand, and whilst the details are amazing in this particular one, it's in kind of perfect condition, it would be a bit of work to look after. Maybe one day, who knows? This is what I'm calling Millionaires Row. There's always the most insane lineup of classic Ferraris along this window down here at Macari's. And some of these we've seen before, but I do want to run through them again because it's just always pretty jaw-dropping. Just to kick things off, F12 TDF on the left, and then a very nicely spec'd 512 BB. Now, to the right of it, quite ludicrously, it's a Ferrari 250 California Spider, one of the most valuable Ferraris that you can go out and buy, hugely desirable. This one actually has no front bumper. Do you see like a front bumper delete? Usually there's a big chrome bar there. This one's got a bit more of a sort of aero look, but we are talking multiple millions, if not multiple tens of millions for this car. Super cool and quite outrageous to see. Right next to it, we've got a 275 GTS, then a 275 GTB in a very nice spec with, look at that wooden steering wheel. Oh, that thing is just absolutely perfect. Then we've got 2 250 Lusos in slightly differing specs, and then another 250 California Spider, this one with that front bumper. Now do you see the difference? That huge big chrome bumper. I actually slightly prefer this car if I'm honest, but yeah, absolutely ludicrous to have 2 in the same room. Then another 275 GTS. Everything comes in pairs here. We've got a Dino and actually a Miura interrupting the Ferrari line, and then 2 quite weird Ferraris, 365 GTC4s, that's what I meant to say. Essentially, 4-seater versions of the Daytona, of which there is one just here, a plexiglass version, the more desirable lineup. But yes, quite outrageously, that lineup of cars probably approaching nearly $100 million. I mean, it's just mental. Now, I mention it pretty much every time I come down here, but one of my favourite all-time Macari experiences was at the Best of Italy festival a few years ago when Joe Macari himself offered to give me a ride in a Maserati MC12 GT1, just like this car. It wasn't this exact car, it was like its sister car. Now, the thing is, if you don't know, these are basically single-seaters, whilst of course the MC12 had 2 seats. The race cars didn't, and I didn't really realise that. So I had to get into the non-existent passenger seat, basically sitting on the floor of a race car, hold onto the roll cage whilst Joe pulled through 3, 4, 5 gears up this hill climb course. Terrifying, literally scarring in the fact that I cut my back on the way up, but absolutely unbelievable. So whenever I see these cars, that's all I can think about. Last year, during Drive the World, I was lucky enough to actually drive a Porsche 959 whilst in Salt Lake City. I explained in that video the kind of history behind the car, the fact that Porsche were intending to enter into the Group B rally scene, but they kind of got there a little bit late, or they took too long developing the car. By the time they turned up, Group B was cancelled. So they eventually turned that project into the 959 supercar, four-wheel drive, way ahead of its time, big turbos, but actually I found slightly disappointing. I don't know why, maybe my expectations were too high, but when I drove it out in Salt Lake City, it was just a bit soft and cumbersome and not as mental as, let's say, an F40, which is often pitched against. This is a 959 Sport, or 959S, as the big letters suggest on the front. A slightly lighter, sort of stiffer and more powerful version, almost 600 horsepower, back in the day. I mean, this was so ahead of its time, it was quite terrifying. Less than 30 of these cars were made, super rare, and this example, near perfect. It had a ton of money spent on it. The interior is stunning and immaculate, and I kind of love this, just as a thing to look at. Having, as I say, driven a standard 959, I don't get that excited by the thoughts of driving this. I'd be intrigued to see the differences, but just as a thing, as a thing to own and look at, wow. But talking of wow, oh my God, because whilst the 959 or Porsche Group B project was kind of a bit of a failure, they did still go rallying, because they developed around 7, I think, Dakar rally versions of the 959, and this is one of them. Actually entered into the 1985 Paris-Dakar rally with Jackie Ickx as the driver, one of the most iconic racing drivers of kind of all different series. But yes, Rothman livery, iconic on all Porsches, I think. Slightly lifted, big off-road wheels, and still wearing the battle scars of the rally. I'm obsessed with this thing. I think you all know I found this new love for sort of heritage rallying, classic rallying, and this is kind of almost the ultimate when I look at it. Now, inside, it's so funny because it's kind of stripped back, but there are lots of elements which, of course, are just carried over from the road car, which you can kind of see across. Even just like the gear shifter looks like a pretty standard Porsche gear shifter. Back in '85, they weren't doing big complicated things like sequential boxes and flappy paddles and things like that. So it's amazing to see this thing. This is a proper bit of motorsport heritage. This should be in a museum, but no, it's currently here available at Macari. So I'm kind of pinching myself. But we didn't come here today to obsess over, well, I kind of did come here to obsess over Porsches, I'm going to be honest. There was an initial plan, and then when I found out these guys had the cars, I was like, okay, but I want to check these out as well. But anyway, for now, I'll stop freaking out about 911, well, not 911s. Anyway, I'm getting confused. Let's go over there to today's main show. Most of you know I'm not a huge fan of modified or modifying Ferraris. I like them to have a sort of OEM standard factory look, but let's face it, I've been tweaking my 360, and whilst it does still look pretty standard from the outside, it's obviously not so standard anymore. So I've got to accept that, you know, not all modified Ferraris are bad, and to be honest, there's one kind of brand or company, one modified, that I've always been pretty sort of accepting of, and that is Novitec, because in my mind, some of the work they do on Ferraris is outstanding. This right here is a Ferrari F12 Novitec N-Largo, one of their kind of flagship cars, their flagship modifications. Now, we'll get onto it more in a second, because obviously they've kind of gone all out on this thing. But fundamentally, the reason this thing is so brilliant, and I think the reason most Novitecs are brilliant, is the work they do to the exhaust. Because way back in the day, when I first started this channel, one of my earliest videos was chasing an F12 N-Largo through the streets of London. And I can still, if I think really hard, hear that sound. Like I remember it so well. It was such a defining moment in Seen Through Glass, but also my car life. I was like, that's a Formula One car on the road. And ever since then, whenever I've seen an N-Largo, I've got overexcited because they just sound nuts. Now, visually, as I mentioned, a little bit questionable because they kind of go all out. It's a huge body kit on this thing. It's super wide, it's lowered, there's lots of different vents and carbon fiber, and there's a wing, and let's face it, Ferraris probably shouldn't often have wings unless they're actually on a racetrack, and yeah, it's out there. However, I think this car is saved by its spec. Let's face it, you all know I'm a fan, green and tan, like unreal. unreal. This is a kind of satin green wrap, but that interior is a Ferrari interior. The car actually used to be a very nice Rosso Berlinetto, very dark red F12 with that factory interior, and then it's kind of been transformed into the beast you see. But yes, it's sort of Stormtrooper-esque, a bit of a monster, and it's definitely going to catch your eye, but I don't think it's horrific in the sense that if you parked a TDF right here and squinted your eyes, there's not a huge difference. There's a bit of a difference, but not a huge difference. So I think compared to some of the other tuners, Mansory and people like that, I don't think Novitec have done a horrific job, but it's definitely, you know, a bit of a Marmite car. But anyway, as I say, it's not really about the looks for me. It's not even about the performance, because the thing does get sort of 40 horsepower over a standard F12. For me, it's all about the sound, and with huge thanks to the team down here at Joe Macari, not only am I going to experience the sound from the outside, today I'm going to experience it from the inside for the first time ever, because yes, I'm going to be jumping behind the wheel for a quick test drive in this absolute monster. The snaps and the cracks on the downshifts. Woo, that's not normal. I mean, that is not normal. To take this thing through some tunnels must just be absolutely nuts. I'm being egged on by a Golf, and it is just other people's reactions are almost as exciting as mine. That's what I love about this car, is it makes other people smile. They're like, yes, and you can't drive this car slowly. I mean, I know I'm cruising now relatively, but you have to keep going through the gears just to extract that noise, to not only make yourself laugh, but other people, because it just is incredible. Underpass. I would get a standard F12 and just put this system on it. I wouldn't go full N-Largo, because the body kit's too much for me. It's so wide, this car. But to have that soundtrack just on a normal F12 in dark green with this interior, could you imagine? Could you? Underpass again! Every underpass, people! Oh, it's a glorious day. It's a glorious freaking day. So different, of course, to my 360, which is barky, which is shouty. This is a symphony. It's an orchestral V12 symphony turned up to 138 decibels. It's also so wide, this car. Oh, I'm gonna be honest. It's so wide. I am taking up at least 2 lanes. So I'm trying to just pay attention to what I'm doing, because the last thing I want to do is cause any damage to this beauty. How has no one snapped this up? I know the N-Largo body kit's not going to be for everyone, but the spec I think is amazing, and the car is still fantastic. If you're somebody who thinks about buying a Lamborghini Aventador, don't. Get this. Every single day of the week, it's a better car in every way, but will guarantee you're going to get as much of a show. This guy in his Golf, I mean, he must have just, he's been following me the whole way. Absolute legend. Loving life more than I am. That would so be me. So be me. I got this guy now creeping up, window down. I could deafen him. I could really ruin his life or make his day. He's not impressed. He's looking furious. That's amazing. I thought he was going to be there going, go on, son. And he was just like, oh my God, why won't this guy shut up? I really hope that camera picked him up.
couldn't have been less enthusiastic. Anyway, well, good on you, son. Crack on with your journey. I hope everything's all right. There we go. Unbelievable!
Well, Alex has parked the car back up now, looking pretty in its original position, and I've kind of recovered from the experience. I mean, all in all, just ridiculous. The car was so wide, I just started to panic towards the end. Really, I turned off all the cameras and I was just concentrating so hard that I didn't do anything wrong. But the noise, I think, okay, arguably it's still better from the outside, as most exhausts are, but you still get so much of it whilst you're driving, and it's just amazing. But if I'm honest, I would just get that exhaust system and put it on a standard F12. This is too much for me. But as I said, if you're an Aventador customer, get rid of it and get this, because this does everything an Aventador does, but a million times better. And just in general, if you want something kind of wild and out there and a bit in your face, I think this is the route to go. It's so quick, I'd forgotten how insanely fast F12s are. It's quite terrifying. But yeah, huge thanks to Macari team for having me down here today, and also, of course, letting me drive this insane car. If you're interested in anything you've seen, of course, get in touch with them. Give it a thumbs up if you have enjoyed it, and make sure you stay subscribed for plenty more videos to come.